beneath the headlines, behind the timelines, there is a story no one wants you to find. Welcome to some unapproved thinking, where forgotten truths, buried patterns, and invisible systems rise to the surface. You weren't crazy. You were just early. Let's begin.
You know, it's pretty wild when you think about it. The depth of mystery surrounding Prince's death. I mean, he was more than just a musician. He was a revolution in a trench coat, a master of reinvention and artistry that really reshaped pop culture. So, why does it feel like there's more to the story than meets the eye? Well, today, we're diving into that very question, why they might have wanted him gone. And let's be real, it's tied to his fierce battle for his master recordings. Prince Rogers Nelson died on April 21st, 2016, at Paisley Park Studios in Chanhassen, Minnesota. The official cause was a fentanyl overdose. But on that same day, a man who had spent the last decade in a war with the most powerful people in music died with something the rest of us will never have: complete ownership of his own master recordings. That's not a coincidence. That's a threat. And this is some unapproved thinking.
Thank you to our sponsor, the Dark Horse Entrepreneur Podcast. Unlock your potential with the Dark Horse Entrepreneur AI Escape Plan, the podcast empowering hardworking parents to break free from the 9-to-5 grind through AI-powered side hustles. Check them out at darkhorseentrepreneur.com. Now back to the show.
First, you need to understand what master recordings actually means, because this is where the story gets real. When you own a master recording, you own the original audio file, the actual tape or digital file that was first created in the studio. That's different from owning the song itself. Most artists, especially in the 1980s and 1990s, didn't own their masters. The label owned them. So the label owned you. Every time your song played on the radio, every stream, every sync to a commercial or a film, money flowed to them first. You got paid whatever they felt generous enough to give you. Prince understood this by 1989, and he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He walked into a Paisley Park session and wrote the word slave across his face, not metaphorically, on his actual face. During public appearances, he was telling you something. He was telling you that the recording industry wasn't about art, it was about ownership. Complete, total, unquestionable ownership. His contract with Warner Brothers was a chain, and everyone knew it. But here's what most people don't understand about Prince's situation. When your contract forces you to make a certain number of albums, and you own nothing they create, the only power you have left is to make them unbearable. So Prince recorded prolifically, obsessively. He filled vaults with hundreds of songs, most never released. Warner Brothers couldn't release them without him. They couldn't profit from them. He was weaponizing his own creativity, and it was working. By the late 1990s, he had leverage, real leverage, and he knew how to use it. The contract wars between Prince and Warner Brothers are the foundation of everything. Between 1994 and 1996, Prince entered a legal battle that fundamentally changed how the music industry worked. He claimed his master recordings belonged to him, not Warner Brothers. He was arguing something radical, that artists should own what they create. Warner Brothers said no. The label said the artist is the tool. The label is the owner. They fought in courts. Prince fought in the court of public opinion. He showed up at award shows with "slave" written on his face. He released an album called Love Symbol that couldn't be called by its name, only by the unpronounceable symbol. He was saying, you own my name. You own my work. You own my future. I own nothing. And then something shifted. By 2004, Prince had regained his masters from Warner Brothers. Part of what made this possible, legally, was the 35-year copyright termination provision of U.S. copyright law, a mechanism that allows artists to reclaim their works from labels after a set period. It took a decade, but he did it. He got out. He owned his recordings, his catalog, his name, his symbol, and now his future. Most artists never accomplish this. Most artists die owing their record labels money. But Prince wasn't most artists. He was something else entirely. And by the time he won, he had become obsessed with a single idea: that the music industry was a system designed to extract wealth from Black creators and funnel it upward to white executives and corporate shareholders. This is where the financial empire enters the story, and where the threat becomes clear. Prince didn't just want to own his music, he wanted to own the principle. By 2015, he was in talks about expanding NPG Records, his new power generation label imprint, into a full independent label empire. Not just to release his own music, he could do that already, but to sign other artists, to break the chain for others. He had worked on NPG Records alongside collaborators, including Levi Ceasar Jr. He had the infrastructure, the money, the credibility. He had Paisley Park, a complete recording studio and creative compound that he controlled entirely. He had the catalog. He had the leverage. What he lacked was time. And here's the financial mechanism that most people miss entirely. In the music industry, the value of a catalog is calculated based on its projected future earnings. Prince's catalog was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Comerica Bank would later value it at $82 million in probate. The IRS countered at $163 million, and they eventually settled at $156 million, a figure that still likely understates what the catalog earns in perpetuity. But the real money wasn't in the past, it was in control of the future. If Prince started his own label and signed young artists, those future catalogs would belong to him, not to Universal, Sony, or Warner Brothers. He would be taking a percentage of each one. He would be building a competing empire. He would be walking away from the old system and inviting others to walk with him. That was the threat. The pharmaceutical explanation for Prince's death, a fentanyl overdose, requires you to believe several specific things. You have to believe that Prince, a man who didn't drink alcohol, who didn't smoke, who was obsessed with physical control and spiritual discipline, suddenly developed an opioid addiction in his 50s. You have to believe he got it from somewhere without a prescription. You have to believe he accidentally took a lethal dose. You have to believe that the toxicology report released by Carver County, Minnesota listed fentanyl as the cause, but no pills, no powder, no paraphernalia was ever found in his home. You have to believe that when his people found him, they found him in full makeup and clothes, not the appearance of someone who had been slumped in addiction. But we can prove Prince had chronic pain. His hip problems, his knee problems, the physical toll of thousands of performances. So perhaps there was a script. Perhaps there was a reason to take something stronger. Perhaps the mechanism is plausible. The question is whether the timing is plausible. Here is the timeline that doesn't get talked about enough. On April 15, 2016, 6 days before he died, Prince's private jet made an emergency landing in Moline, Illinois. He had lost consciousness. Emergency responders revived him with naloxone, the opioid overdose reversal drug. That's not a wellness check, that's a near-death event. In response to that incident, his team reached out to Dr. Howard Kornfeld, a California-based addiction specialist. Dr. Kornfeld couldn't travel immediately, so he sent his son, Andrew Kornfeld, to Paisley Park as an advance representative, carrying a treatment plan and buprenorphine to help Prince begin addressing the dependency. It was Andrew Kornfeld, along with Prince's longtime drummer and personal assistant Kirk Johnson, who found Prince unresponsive in the Paisley Park elevator the following morning on April 21. The two men who found him were there specifically because Prince had been trying to get help. On April 16, 2016, 5 days before he died, Prince held a secret meeting at Paisley Park. No cameras, no press. One attendee later described it as urgent. Prince told him he wasn't feeling well, but he needed to discuss his estate, his will, and the protection of his catalog after his death. He was 57 years old and concerned about succession. Then, 5 days later, he was dead. No suicide note, no history of self-harm, just dead. The coroner ruled it an accident. The estate situation is crucial here because it reveals what Prince was trying to prevent. Prince had no will on file at the time of his death. That meant his estate went through probate, the public court system. That meant his catalog would be split among his family members according to Minnesota law. That meant the possibility of his empire being sold off, divided up, absorbed back into the system he had spent his entire life fighting against. If he had lived 3 weeks longer, he would have signed a new will protecting the catalog. The timing is the motif. The urgency returns, but now it's poisoned. Multiple sources claim Prince was working to expand NPG Records into his independent label empire, signing contracts, scheduling meetings with young artists, planning a parallel system, a way to own and control the next generation of Black music creation. But sadly, that never happened. What did happen is that his estate has become one of the most closely guarded financial structures in American history. His sister, Tyka Nelson, his brother, Alfred Jackson, and his nephew got initial control. Control then shifted to Comerica Bank as executor, with estate advisors including Londell McMillan involved in navigating the post-death structure. Within 6 months of Prince's death, by November 2016, exclusive licensing and distribution deals with Universal Music Group were being negotiated and signed. Universal now controls much of Prince's catalog and its distribution. And by 2021 through 2023, investment firm Primary Wave Music had purchased majority stakes from multiple heirs, meaning Prince's catalog is now substantially controlled by a private equity music investment company. Universal is one of the 3 major labels that Prince was trying to disrupt. Primary Wave is the kind of financial vehicle he was explicitly trying to make irrelevant. They are now selling his masters to the world. The irony here is not subtle. You can tell yourself that fentanyl doesn't care about your principles. You can tell yourself that addiction doesn't check your net worth. You can tell yourself that the timing is coincidence. You can tell yourself that the absence of physical evidence of drug use or the swift transition of his catalog back into the hands of major labels and investment firms, or the fact that he died exactly before signing protections into law, you can tell yourself all of this is accident. But here's what you should actually understand. Prince's death solved a very specific problem for a very specific industry. An artist who owned his masters, who was planning to create an independent system, who was proof that you could escape the chains, that artist is dangerous. That artist teaches. That artist shows the way. And once you understand the financial stakes, once you understand that his catalog's value was contested into the hundreds of millions, once you understand that an independent NPG Records could contesting the entire structure of music ownership for the next generation, once you understand that, the story becomes less about what Prince did and more about what was at risk. The coroner's report is official. The cause is documented. The death was legal. And his masters are now safely back where the industry wanted them all along. You'll never know what the truth is, but you'll always know what was convenient. Now that is what makes doves cry tears of purple rain. On a quick final note, back in 1986, Prince starred in and directed a movie called Under the Cherry Moon. In this movie, he played a charismatic character named Christopher Tracy. There is a song I just love from this movie entitled Sometimes It Snows in April. In that song, there is a line that has always stuck with me. It says, Tracy died soon after a long-fought civil war. When it came out, it meant something personal to me because of something I was going through, as much of Prince's music still does for so many of us. But knowing this behind-the-scenes story of his life and what he fought so hard for, his civil war against the music industry, well, now that same line means something so much more, don't you think? This has been some unapproved thinking. Tracy, out.
If this story didn't sit right with you, good. You're not here to be comforted. You're here to see what others overlook. Thanks for exploring some unapproved thinking. Learn more at someunapprovedthinking.com. New episodes drop weekly. Subscribe, share, and keep questioning, because the pattern's still playing out, and next time, we're going deeper.